Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, "You Would Like Me to Adhere to the Contract? In that case, I require a hotel until you resolve all of these issues." A few years ago, I moved back to the city in which I was a university student. As I was now a young professional and had experienced significant issues with housemates in the past, non-payment of bills, having to do all the cleaning, I decided that I would rent a small flat from a reputable agency which specifically catered for young professionals such as myself. I went and viewed the property, which was quite messy, and needed to have a few things addressed, i.e. the vinyl flooring in the kitchen was ripped, one of the drawers in the freezer was broken. But seeing as tenants were still living in the property, and the agency assured me that between tenants the landlord would clean the property, and resolve any small issues prior to moving in, I happily signed a contract, and wrote a checks for the deposit, and first month of rent. 2 months later, I moved into the property, and was welcomed with the following issues. Note, I just happened to stumble upon the list I made at the time when clearing out an old hard drive a few days ago. General. The entire property had not been cleaned. Fire door wouldn't close, breach of fire regulations. The previous tenants had left much of their belongings behind, namely clothes and bedding. General waste was present in all rooms, bins had not been emptied. Batteries had been removed from all of the fire, smoke alarms. By law, they were meant to be hardwired in rented property. Half of the light bulbs had been removed from the property. Hallway. Mains supply and circuit breaker ripped from wall, incredibly dangerous. Carpet soiled. Bedroom. Slats on bed broken, so would not have been able to sleep on it. Mattress torn and ripped. Vinyl floor ripped up. Window jammed closed. Bathroom. Fecal matter on light switch. Mirror broken. Toilet had not been cleaned, still had fecal stains in bowl. Shower door broken off hinges. Vinyl floor torn up. Kitchen, living room. Washing machine broken. All drawers in fridge freezer absent or broken beyond repair. Gas cooker, missing burner caps and pan rail, therefore unusable. 2 cupboard doors hanging off. Vinyl floor ripped up. Curtain pole ripped down. It was very clear that 2 things had occurred here. The first being that the previous tenants had done a bit of a number on the property. That they had not respected the property, and had left quite a lot of damage in their wake. They did not even have the decency to empty the place of their contents, and at bare minimum, take the rubbish out before leaving. The second issue, however, is that the landlord had evidently not made any significant attempt to bring the property back into a habitable state prior to me moving in. Being the reasonable guy that I was, I called the landlord and asked if he could resolve these issues immediately. Primarily as the property was genuinely in a dangerous and non-inhabitable state. I did not want to be a dick about it, however, at the bare minimum, the flat should be safe to inhabit. The landlord dismissed all of my complaints, and stated that his wife, he was on a business trip to Dubai, had inspected and cleaned the property a few days before, and all was fine, a blatant lie. I told him that I was extremely unhappy with the situation, and he told me to adhere to the contract which I had signed. He subsequently put the phone down. Any sympathy I had for the landlord evaporated at this moment. He was happy for me to live in a dangerous property. So I went through my contract line by line, and found 2 key pieces of information. If a property is deemed to be in breach of fire regulations and/or is deemed uninhabitable by a suitable representative, it is the responsibility of the landlord to resolve such issues immediately. If the landlord cannot resolve such issues immediately, it is the responsibility of the landlord to provide alternative accommodation to the tenant until the property is returned to a habitable state. Fortunately, a close member of my family at the time was a fellow of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Within the hour I had a formal letter stating that the property was uninhabitable and dangerous. I had this emailed to the landlord, address helpfully listed on the contract. Within 10 minutes, I had a call from him arranging emergency accommodation at a local hotel until he returned from his business trip, 3 days later. On his return, he drove directly to the property from the airport, and returned the checks for my deposit and first month's rent to me, and asked me to move out. Which I gladly did. Unbeknownst to him, a copy of the letter had been sent by my family member to the housing ombudsman and the local authority. The last thing I heard is that this bloke ended up being investigated, heavily fined, and had to sell the house. The next story is titled, Read it in French. Okay. I live and studied in a Spanish-speaking country, and since I went to a public university, most of my classmates didn't speak English. By the time this story happened, I was fluent in English and French. For one of my classes, the teacher had a digital version of the subject's textbook, but he had it in English. The very first time he used the textbook in class, he asked me to read out loud. It wasn't immediately clear to me if he wanted me to read in English for him to translate later, or if he wanted me to read and translate into Spanish, especially since he had no way to know my English level, so I asked. In Spanish? No, in French, he answered with a sarcasm. And that's what I did. I read and translated the whole paragraph into French. After I finished, I could see he was angry, while my classmates were mostly astonished. The next story is titled, Karen Doesn't Like Me Knocking. Okay, then I won't. I work for a parcel delivery company in Australia. I often get special requests from customers for how to handle delivery to their addresses, and they're usually really polite about it. So I try my best to help them out a bit. Today, after knocking on a door, it was promptly answered by a Karen who was not happy. You see, she was sitting rather close to the door and my knock had scared her. No big deal, it happens sometimes, and we usually laugh it off. But Karen immediately proceeded to berate me on how terrible of a person I am for having knocked so loud when she was sitting so close, as if I'm supposed to know where she is in her house. If she was polite, I might have tried to work something out, and I still tried the diplomatic approach of apologizing and moving on. But she simply got louder and angrier. So loud that the neighbor came out to see what the commotion was. She ended up demanding my name and telling me she would be lodging a complaint about me. When I finished my shift, I was informed from my boss that the complaint had indeed been lodged. What I hadn't expected was that the neighbor had also called in to stand up for me and say that I had been verbally abused by Karen. My company has recently taken out a zero-tolerance policy on abuse towards staff. Because of Karen's outburst, we have all been instructed that to ensure no one knocks on Karen's door too loud, we are never to deliver to her house again. We are the only delivery company that services her area, and she is a heavy online shopper. The next story is titled, Today's My Last. Okay, a few years ago I was stuck in a crappy, albeit well-paid job. I was middle management, and ducking hated it. My boss was an asshat who, while on a personal level was nice, as a boss was a horrible fit. So after working here I got an amazing opportunity at another firm doing what I wanted to do. I walk into my boss's office, and hand in my 2-week notice. He looks down, and says, thanks, no need to stay, please get your things and leave. I was kinda shocked because I still had work that was complicated and important to the firm, albeit not something that he couldn't do himself, so I asked him to confirm that he wants me out, and that as of this minute I don't work for the company, so he's firing me. He said yes, I'm not needed, and so I can leave immediately. So I calmly said, okay great, can you please put that in writing, so that I have a record that I'm being fired since you don't need me, so I can file for unemployment. Immediately you can see the blood leave his face and the realization of what his decision would do, and stammers out a, what, why would you do that? I say, well I wanted to give 2 weeks so I can finish up my projects and hand them off. I was expecting that income, and if I'm fired I won't get it, and because it's courtesy to provide a 2-week notice. Since you're firing me, I won't get paid, and the employment will replace a portion of my lost income. He says, stay here please, I'll be right back, and speed walks out his office to presumably our. I'm sitting there for about 20 minutes, and my co-workers, who sit right outside his office, are cracking up. When he comes back, he says that I'm not being fired, but that today was my last day, and that I'll be paid for the 2 weeks. So for my last 2 weeks I was able to get paid, go to happy hours, and relax, all because I maliciously complied for 20 minutes. The next story is titled, Only Attend Meetings You Are Invited to. This happened a couple of years ago. My boss wanted me to attend a conference in another city and that I am to attend everything. I looked at the agenda and there was an additional meeting associated with the conference that looked like I didn't need to attend. When I tried to ask her about it, she cut me off and said, everything. So, I went to the meeting. I got a lot of side-eyed looks, was asked why I was there at one point, to which my reply was, my boss told me to attend. They know my boss. I ran into my boss the next day at the conference. She asked if I attended the meeting. I told her I did and would be happy to report what I learned. She just said, "Not good," turned her back to me and started talking with someone else. Back at work the following week, she called me for a meeting to tell me I should not have attended that meeting and in the future I will only attend meeting that I am specifically invited to. Again, she cut me off when I tried to explain. A couple of days later our department was having an important meeting and an Outlook meeting notice went out to everyone, but not to me. I worked away as all of my co-workers shuffle off to the meeting and then back again at the conclusion of the meeting. My boss comes to my cubicle, pissed off. "Why weren't you at the meeting?" It was hard not to smile when I told her that I was not invited. Her face turned red and she stammered, "That was an oversight." I just shrugged my shoulders and told her I was just respecting her directions. She stormed off. Amazingly, I still work there, but she has improved her communication a little bit. The next story is titled, "Ask an Experienced Worker to Be More Thorough?" You betcha. So, the situation I'm about to describe is from a food service job that I no longer work at. I absolutely loved it at the time, and was pretty damn good at it, since I got promoted from regular crew to HR manager and third in charge of the store within like a year. I ended up quitting due to some issues with the GM, but that's neither here nor there. At the time of this story I was a manager in training, and knew my way around the store very well. I had the respect of my coworkers and of customers, and got along with pretty much everyone. My specialty at the time was working drive-thru. I was working back at the first drive-thru window, which we called back booth, where the worker confirms the drive-thru order and collects payment. We had recently been told by franchise management that we don't ask customers if they want a receipt, we just hand it to them and they have the ability to refuse it. Seems harmless enough, but in this case it would have helped the situation. A side note, while most people took orders and cashed out drive-thru one at a time, I was able to do both simultaneously to cut down on time. A customer comes through in a large diesel truck, which anyone who's worked a drive-thru will know can cause issues with hearing the order. This guy had to shout over his truck what he wanted, and then pulled ahead before I could confirm his order. When he got to the window, he pulled out his card and handed it to me before I could confirm again. As I was taking another order, I quickly walked him through his order and total while I was swiping his card, then continued to take another order as I handed him his card and receipt. He grabbed the card, but not the receipt, and continued to the next window. As this was common, I simply threw away the receipt to prevent clutter. Apparently, I entered one of his items wrong, and he called later to complain, and specifically said if she hadn't been talking to someone else the whole time, maybe she would have been able to do her job. My manager, who knew how I worked and placed me in back booth for that reason, came back and let me explain the situation to him before judging. He then said, "How about you try and do things one at a time? That way you won't have any more complaints." A few things to note. 1. We all got complaints for stupid reason, because we can do things perfectly and still be wrong. 'Cause that's what people do. 2. Our company takes drive-thru time very seriously. If we went over, say, 150 seconds for a person to start an order to when they left our drive-thru, we weren't being fast enough. 3. My manager knew both of those things, and placed me in back booth because, frankly, I was the best. I was able to multitask with little to no error, and therefore extremely decreased our drive-thru times. But you know what? I said fine. I wasn't going to argue during a busy weekend lunch period, so I just did as he said. I would take an order, then confirm and complete the order at my window, one at a time, without any crossover. Our times tanked. We went from a happy 150 to 160 to over 400 with like 10 minutes. People began complaining left and right that their food was cold, they waited too long, why did they have to be parked for a 2-item order, etc. And once the times tank, it's near impossible to get them back up for a good 4 to 5 hours, especially on the weekends. My manager came back and looked at me. I maintained eye contact with him as I took a large order, then felt him watch me as I carefully went over an even larger order at my window to confirm and pay. I then looked over at him and said, "You said to do them one at a time," with a big smile. Him, being a guy with a great sense of humor, just laughed and told me to shut the hell up and do my job. The times went down pretty quickly after that. No regrets. The next story is titled, "I asked my French teacher what language to complete my work in and he said Japanese." So in French class, a lot of our work involves reading a text and either answering questions in English or French about the content. Because of this, many people ask my teacher what language to answer in for certain questions, and his standard answer is Japanese, sarcasm, because that's a completely different language to English and French. He does this when he thinks that it is obvious, but sometimes it is not so obvious for us. Anyways, yesterday in class, we were doing a worksheet and I asked my teacher what language I should answer the questions in. When he said Japanese, I typed my answer into Google Translate and copied the entire thing into Japanese. I filled out all of the questions, time-consuming as I was handwriting, but worth it, and then handed in my completed work. The look on his face was absolutely priceless. Let's just say, I don't think that he will ask us to do our work in Japanese again. The next story is titled, Malicious Apple Picking. My brother and I were asked by our dad to pick a basket of apples. We quickly comply. A couple of hours later he gets annoyed about us having not picked all of the apples, and tells us to pick them all. Malicious compliance time. We then pick every apple off of our 2 trees, regardless of size or ripeness. As expected, he was annoyed that we had not left the unripe, small ones. It was worth the reaction to do it. The next story is titled, You Don't Know How Much I Do for This Command. I was in the Navy and attached to an aviation squadron. The thing was I was a cook for the command. This is important later on. So me being a cook, I was able to get favors done for me very easily. The Navy has an award called JR Sailor of the Quarter and also JR Sailor of the Year. I was selected for JR Sailor of the Quarter, which meant I was up for JR Sailor of the Year. The Command Master Chief knew I was calling in on favors for the command. The cast. CS2, me Master Chief, Command Master Chief, the view board for the JR Sailor of the Year. There are 5 of them but only 2 that count, Chief 1, Chief 2, Kirby Barracks Chief. I entered the room in which the view board was taking place. I see Master Chief sitting in the back and the rest of the board. As soon as I sat down it began. Chief 1, CS2, be even happy you are here. You are not even Aviation Chief 2, you don't deserve the award. You don't do anything special for the command. I am beyond pissed off and know there is no way I am getting this award. Master Chief sees I am pissed. Master Chief, CS2 does more than you know for the command. The view board goes on. I answer all their questions. Once finished I do an about face and leave the room. I slam the door open and closed. Master Chief follows me out. CS2, me, Master Chief, I am so done with this BS. I am not going to do anything for a while for the command. No more favors since according to them I don't do anything special. Master Chief goes back in. Master Chief, to the view board, you pissed her off. CS2 said she is done doing anything for the command. Once of the favors I did for the command was to have the barracks chief sign off single BHA, basic housing allowance. There was a waiting list for people to move out of the barracks and live out in town. Another favor was to get housing to come to the command or barracks to fill out storage paperwork. Each time we went on deployment everyone living in the barracks had to put their belongings in base storage. Otherwise each person had to go to housing themselves. I used to be stationed with the barracks chief. Well, since I don't do anything special, I called the Kirby. I told him to put the BHA from my command on the waiting list. He said he will put the ones he has in front of him on the list. I am in the administration office. I overhear Chief 1 talking to Master Chief about some of his sailors' BHA request. Master Chief OCS2 took care of those for the command. Chief 1, I was just wondering where the approvals are. Usually it take 3 days to get them back. Master Chief, he spotted me in the office. CS2, do you know about the BHA request? CS2, me, well Master Chief, since I don't do anything special for the command I told Kirby to add them to the list they have. Chief 1 picks up the phone to call Kirby. Kirby, can you give me an update on the BHA request for our command? Kirby, oh yes, CS2 told me that since she does nothing special for your command, put you on the list. I was signing them off as a favor for her since we were stationed together before. Chief 1, okay, can you tell me where is gives a name on the list? Kirby, they are number 312. And any request from your command will go on the list until CS2 asks me to do her the favor again. Chief 2 comes in to ask about the housing rep for storage. Master Chief, do you know when housing is coming to do the paperwork for the sailors in the barracks? Master Chief CS2 made the arrangements for them to come in. I have already called housing and told them what happened. Housing was not going to come to command unless I asked. Master Chief calls housing on speakerphone. Housing told Master Chief that everyone needs to come to housing to fill out the paperwork and make an appointment for a pack-up. I usually did the appointment for each room. So now all 134 sailors that lived in the barracks had to go to housing. Chief 1 and Chief 2 asked me to call in favors and get the BHA signed off and housing to come and do the paperwork. I looked at both of them and said with a smile, CS2, me, don't forget I am not aviation and I don't do anything special for the command. So no, I won't call in any favors. In the end, the BHA requests were on the list for 8 months and all 134 sailors living in the barracks had to take time off of work to do paperwork for their storage. The next story is titled, Teacher Didn't Comply with Rules, so I maliciously complied with her way. In high school, I was part of the IT classes in our VOTech building. During the summer between junior and senior year, the school district's IT guys made some major mistakes all over the building. For one thing, they got new printers but gave them all the same IP name, so you never knew which printer in the building would print your stuff out. For another, they made summer school accounts on all the computers but gave them all admin privileges, which some students made good use of to screw a lot of things up. We spent the first month of senior year fixing these issues, then our teacher got a contract wrote up saying they will stay the hell out of our building and leave maintenance to us unless it is something really serious. There was also an office programs teacher, Word, Excel, etc., who was not very tech savvy outside those particular things. She was not fond of having to rely on students to fix things every time she had problems, so she often ignored the rules and called the school district IT guys to take care of issues anyway. I happened to have a class with her, and one time I came to class and half the room had no internet. She'd called them up to fix it. I knew right away the problem. The computers were split between 2 routers, one for each side of the room. Reset the one for that side and they will all get their internet back. In fact, my seat was literally right next to the router, so I could have reached over and fixed it myself in an instant. But since she didn't follow the rules, I stayed silent and left them to figure it out. They were already there when I arrived and it still took until the end of the class time for them to finally figure out what to do. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.